Treaty. The text above is a quotation from the introduction of the Apostolic Constitution Exul Familia Nazaretana issued by Pius XII in 1952. Considered as the Magna Carta of the pastoral care of migrants, this document summarizes and integrates the various strands of reflection of the Catholic Church on human mobility in earlier centuries. Since 1952, the Catholic Church has been developing a consistent and ever broader teaching on migration from her global perspective. Through a long series of official documents, messages, and speeches, popes and Vatican dicasteries have formulated assessments, expressed concerns, highlighted principles, and recommended pastoral actions aimed at catering to all people on the move, particularly to those in vulnerable situations. In this contribution, I intend to focus on the magisterium of Pope Francis, who was able to collect and treasure what was produced by his predecessors and their close collaborators in terms of reading and interpreting the migration phenomenon and recommending pastoral action. Human mobility in the third millennium present old and new challenges that must be considered within a global scenario marked by a real epochal change. Today's migration in their various forms directly affect a significant portion of humanity and poses a series of challenges to the Catholic Church as well to all societies. Some of these challenges are particularly pressing and worthy of particular consideration. They can be arranged in three different time frames: short, medium, and long term. These times, however, refer to the when of the changes produced by the responses and not to the implementation of the latter, since it is necessary to act immediately in all three areas. The images and stories which describe the journeys of hope along the different migratory routes are often dramatic. Abuse, deception, exploitation, violence, kidnappings, blackmail, and torture have become so frequent that they are now considered characteristic features of most of the migration experiences of the third millennium. Too many of these experiences end in the death of migrants. Rivers, seas, mountains, and deserts in every continent have become large cemeteries, often denying family members the comfort of burying their loved ones. In this context, the first short-term challenge is to save lives. Since his visit to Lampedusa in July 2013, Pope Francis has not ceased to denounce the unacceptable indifference and embarrassing silence in the face of the many tragedies affecting migrants and refugees. In April 2021, praying for the victims of yet another shipwreck, the Holy Father used very strong words. I confess, I quote, "I am very saddened by the tragedy that has once again taken place in the Mediterranean in recent days. 130 migrants died in the sea. They are people. They are human lives who begged for help in vain for 2 whole days. Help that never arrived. Brothers and sisters, let us ask ourselves about these umpteenth tragedies. It is a time for shame. Let us pray for these brothers and sisters and for the many who continue to die in these tragic crossings. Let us also pray for those who can help but prefer to look the other way. Let us pray for them in silence. The second challenge is to safeguard the dignity of migrants, refugees, internally displaced persons, and victims of trafficking. These are too often reduced to numbers. They are used of a bargaining chip or blackmail for economic or political interest. They are stripped of their dignity on the basis of legal non-compliance. In this regard, as early as 1995, John Paul II recalled that his irregular legal status cannot allow the migrants to lose their dignity, since they are endowed with inalienable rights which can neither be violated nor ignored. As far as the medium term is concerned, a first emerging challenge is that of an essentially negative narrative about migrants and refugees. In 2018, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, stressed that migration has often been misrepresented and exploited for political gain. Unregulated, unmanaged migration has created false and negative perceptions of migrants that feed into a narrative of xenophobia, intolerance, and racism. For this reason, the international community felt compelled to formally commit itself to a more realistic, humane, and constructive public discourse on migration and migrants. To help local populations overcome frequent prejudices and suspicions against migrants and refugees, the media must work for the truth responsibly. It is up to them, in fact, to break down stereotypes and to offer correct information in reporting the errors of a few as well as the honesty, rectitude, and goodness of the majority. The second challenge is strongly linked to the first, and it is often a natural consequence of it. Many communities witnessing the massive arrival of migrants and refugees are overwhelmed by the fear that society will become less secure, that identity and culture will be lost, that competition for jobs will become stiffer, and even that criminal activity will increase. The risk is that this fear, often unfounded, strongly conditions human relationship, depriving many of the desire and the ability to go out to meet the other. The third challenge is the characterization of most of the migration flows of the third millennium. As Pope Francis well observed in 2017, in the majority of cases, this movement is caused by conflict, natural disasters, persecution, climate change, violence, extreme poverty, and inhumane living conditions. The problems generated by this characterization and by the complex human situation resulting from these movements require a series of urgent, coordinated, and effective responses, which the Holy Father has summarized in 4 verbs: welcome, protect, promote, and integrate. Each verb to be understood as a part of a single process referred to a group of challenges posed by current migrations. It is necessary to welcome because there are too many wayfarers beaten and abandoned on the road, while caught up as we are with our own needs. The sight of a person who is suffering disturbs us. It makes us uneasy, since we have no time to waste on other people's problems. These are symptoms of an unhealthy society, a society that seeks prosperity but turns its back on suffering. It is necessary to protect because no human individual or group can consider itself absolute, entitled to bypass the dignity and the rights of other individuals or their social groupings. And the recognition of this dignity and rights cannot be conditioned on the color of skin, religion, abilities, place of origin, or place of residence. It is necessary to promote because in many cases migrants and refugees are treated as guests for life, thus jeopardizing their ability to actively contribute to the growth of local communities. They are not seen as entitled like others to participate in the life of society, and it is forgotten that they possess the same intrinsic dignity as any person. Hence, they ought to be agents in their own redemptions. It is necessary to integrate because the division between us and others is killing our dream of universal fraternity. We must resist the temptation to build a culture of walls, to raise walls, walls in the heart, walls on the land, in order to prevent this encounter with other cultures, with other people. And those who raise walls will end up as slaves within their very walls they have built. The fourth challenge refers to the obstinacy to treat migration issues as an exclusively national competence. As Pope Francis well observes, states are not able on their own to implement adequate solutions, since the consequences of a decision made by each inevitably have repercussions on the entire international community. As a result, our response can only be the fruit of a common effort to develop a form of global governance with regard to movements of migration. The international community took significant steps forward at the end of 2018 with the adoption of a Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees, but the path is still very long and full of obstacles. With respect to the long term, the first challenge is the eradication of the root causes of forced migration. One can distinguish endemic causes. It has localized structural situations with very deep historical roots, and conjunctural causes. It has events of a different nature that produce unfavorable situation at a given historical moment. Among the endemic causes, one can count on the economic disparities between the various regions of the world, the decades-long plundering of resources of the least developed countries, extreme poverty and inhumane living conditions, corruption, and the latent violence that usually generates a climate of permanent insecurity. Among the causes of conjunctural causes, one can count armed conflicts, natural disaster, totalitarian regime, and persecution of various kind, and the climate crisis. The second challenge to be considered in the future is constituted by certain trends in our world that hinder the development of universal fraternity. The dream of a common family, according to Pope Francis, is seriously threatened by the culpable lack of projects for all human beings, by the blatant absence of a common course in the process of globalization and development, by the systemic violation of human rights and borders, and by new forms of subjugation of the poor and vulnerable. All the challenges presented above can be read in a broader context, which goes beyond considerations related to the pure migration phenomenon. In fact, they can be interpreted as alarm bells which signal the danger of some problematic realities that characterize today's world. In these two first decades of the third millennium, there has been an intense work of deepening the nexus between migration and development, strongly promoted by the international community. Numerous studies have been produced on the impact, real or potential, of migration on the economic and social growth of both the community of origin and those of arrival. It seems that there is a constant critical element in the various analyses, the frequent disconnection among the various areas of politics, and in particular between economic, population, and migration policies. The rigid compartmentalization of questions relating to the common good seems to prevent dialogue between the different political subjects entrusted with particular responsibility, so that each ministry of our office often acts independently. There is often overlapping of policies and programs, and it does not seem reconcilable. Above all, there seems to be a lack of an overall vision, which is extremely necessary in this time in which politics is required to be far-sighted in order to face the serious anthropological crisis. The aforementioned Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration states that to develop and implement effective migration policies and practices, a whole of government approach is needed to ensure horizontal and vertical policy coherence across all sectors and levels of government. This observation could well be applied to other policy areas. In recent years, many forced migration flows as well as many negative reactions from immigrants community represent a tangible example of a throwaway culture, the danger of which has been repeatedly denounced by Pope Francis since the beginning of his pontificate. This culture is clearly described in all its dramatic application to human relation in the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti. Some parts, I quote, of human family, it appears, can be readily sacrificed for the sake of others considered worthy of a carefree existence. Ultimately, persons are no longer seen as a paramount value to be cared for and respected, especially when they are poor and disabled, not yet useful like the unborn, or no longer needed like the elderly. We have grown indifferent to all kinds of wastefulness, starting from the waste of food, which is deplorable in the extreme. The throwaway culture seems more acceptable in the case of migrants, displaced people, and refugees, who can be more easily excluded as long as they represent the others, as opposed to us. However, it is much more subtle, and it is undermining the very foundations of a human community. The throwaway culture which smuggles the illusion of being omnipotent and members of a world elite is inexorably leading to closure in one's own interest, isolation, and the death of fraternity. The throwaway culture is one of the nefarious consequences of unbridled consumerism, which represents a key element of a prevailing economic system which enslaved to the mirages of production. We can no longer believe naively or crudely in the promises of a greater equity, social inclusion resulting from mere economic growth. The truth is that humanity is increasingly divided between the few who enjoy most of the resources and the many who are left with the crumbs. The socio-economic system is unjust at its root. Today's economic mechanism promotes inordinate consumption. Yes, it is evident that unbridled consumerism combined with inequality proves doubly damaging of the social fabric. Inequality eventually engenders a violence which recourse to arms cannot and never will be able to resolve. It is this system that generates many of the deportation factors underlying forced migration today, and it is the same system that produces many of the pull factors that feed the often unfulfilled hopes of development and wealth of millions of migrant workers. It is an unsustainable system and must be changed. In the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis expresses his concern for the rise of instances of a myopic, extremist, resentful, and aggressive nationalism. Such instances aim to persuade that it is possible to grow alone as a national group, regardless of the ruin of others, and that closing oneself to others is a guarantee of greater security. These tendencies, however, are symptoms of a deeper tendency toward radical individualism, according to whose logic the value of things and people is determined by the benefit that can be derived from them at the individual level. Individualism does not make us more free, more equal, more fraternal. The mere sum of individual interest is not capable of generating a better world for the whole human family, nor it can save us from the many ills that are now increasingly globalized. Radical individualism is a virus that is extremely difficult to eliminate, for it is clever. It makes us believe that everything consists in giving free rein to our own ambitions, or as if by pursuing ever greater ambitions and creating safety nets, we would somehow be serving the common good. Radical individualism leads inexorably to the loss of a collective dimension of human life. It is a negation of the relation dimension of human existence, an essential dimension willed by the Creator and shaped in His image. Radical individualism constitutes a serious threat to the existence of all institutions, from the state to the family. The challenges of today's world, including those in the field of migration, must be interpreted as an opportunity for growth, a concrete possibility to do things better, to close one cycle and open another. The challenge of COVID-19, which has been blocking the world for several months, can also be interpreted in this way. It is a unique opportunity to restore our disfigured humanity. The COVID-19 pandemic, Pope Francis said, unexpectedly erupted, exposing our false securities. Aside from different ways that various countries responded to the crisis, their inability to work together became quite evident. For all our hyper-connectivity, we witnessed a fragmentation that made it more difficult to resolve problems that affect all of us. Anyone who thinks that the only lesson to be learned was a need to improve what we were already doing or to refine existing systems and regulation is denying reality. Thanks to the pandemic, we have understood the need to regenerate society and not to return to the so-called normality, which is an alien normality, indeed, which was alien before pandemic. We have still the possibility to reset the world system and to move to its 2.0 version, a new version without the defects of the previous one, more fraternal and inclusive. I would like to conclude with few words of hope, quoting Pope Francis' messages for the 107th World Day of Migrants and Refugees. The prophet Joel predicted that the messianic future would be at a time of dreams and visions inspired by the Spirit. I will pour out my Spirit in all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. We are called to dream together, fearlessly, as a single human family, as companions on the same journey, as sons and daughters of the same earth that is our common home, sisters and brothers all. Thank you.